You do not know me, my name is Thomas, and I'm the publisher and editorial director for the magazine Systems Integration Asia, which has been serving the industry for the past 21 years. And also, I'm very happy and pleased that we could collaborate with InfoComm Asia for this AV Leaders Connect. And obviously, I'm going to be an MC for tonight, for today, sorry. Okay, besides this event here in Bangkok, InfoComm also delivers similar events in Beijing and Mumbai for the China and Indian markets respectively. Together, these three events provide access to the largest AV markets in Asia and brings together more than 70,000 attendees, comprising AV professionals like yourselves and vertical market end users. As most of you may know, this is the third time InfoComm exhibition is being held in Thailand. The first edition in 2019 was InfoComm Southeast Asia, which of course, as we all know, was unfortunately disrupted as an in-person event in 2020 and 2021 due to the pandemic. But it returned last year. This year, it has been rebranded as InfoComm Asia. And it's also moved to this beautifully renovated Queen Sirikit National Convention Center. And we, the organizers, as well as the exhibitors, are looking forward to welcoming thousands of visitors from all over Asia to discover new AV technologies, explore collaborations and opportunities, and of course, rekindle friendships. Today's program will open with a keynote address that will provide you with an overview of what's happening in the Pro AV market around the world. This will be followed by a panel discussion where you, the audience, are encouraged to interact with the panelists. We will then adjourn outside this room for networking reception around 12:20 or so. So that will be an opportunity for all of you to mingle, catch up with your peers, and network. So, without any further ado, allow me to begin this session. We will be kicking off with a keynote presentation titled Global Pro AV Market Trends in the Next 3 to 5 Years. As communication, collaboration, and user experience technologies evolve at an incredible pace, the AV market is undergoing a phenomenal transformation. This session will provide an update on the current AV global market scenario, the latest technology, market trends, and key drivers, and the overall market environment. Presenting the keynote is a very familiar figure to most of us, Dave Labuskes, who has been the CEO of AVIXA, the Audiovisual Integrated Experience Association, since January 2013. Since joining AVIXA, Dave has worked to promote industry professionalism, expand and deliver its global programs, and bring the AV family together. Please join me in welcoming David to the stage.
Don't you love it when AV works? Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you all for being here. Welcome to InfoComm Asia 2023. I think when each of us get together, and I'm sure many of us attend events like this 100 times a year, maybe not for those 2 years that Thomas alluded to, we listen to a lot of people introduce a presentation like this and oftentimes lose some of the words. But I think one of the key phrases that Thomas used was the regathering of friends. And the other key phrase that he used was the center and growing AV community. Those are two aspects of this industry that I think separate it from almost every other industry. And that the challenge of delivering the solutions that we deliver or obtaining the solutions that we need demand working in partnership. with ecosystems. And that demand and that growth of partnership and friendships and community is a key fundamental aspect of our industry. I'm going to talk about a lot of numbers today, but before I do that, I really wanted to highlight the magic of our industry. I wanted to keep us with context to think about what is AV, what are the solutions that AV brings to bear, why are we all in this profession, and why am I talking about this? Well, I'm the CEO, as Thomas mentioned, of the AudioVisual and Integrated Experience Association. We're one of the owners of those three events that brings the Asian market together to explore solutions for tomorrow. We also, of course, participate in ownership of the ISE show in Europe and the North American InfoComm show that sort of started all of these other shows. We are an industry association, not for profit, with really two missions. One is to be a catalyst for the growth of that AV marketplace. And the other is to be a hub for those who have chosen AV as their profession. And we do that with the shows. We also do it with a certification program and education and content. And what I'm going to lean on today, a key investment in understanding our marketplace. So having a partnership with Ondia and developing a market intelligence group that looks at the trends and looks at the industry, both from a supply side as well as a demand side. So I know I promised you lots of numbers, but I'm still not going to get to those numbers. I want to just remind you of what AV is. AV is the ability to connect people with technology and share experiences around the world. And we do that in meeting rooms. We do that in restaurants and bars, experiencing the football games or the sports experiences together in camaraderie, feeling the excitement, reinforcing the experience of those events. We use it to get work done, and we use it in ways we've never used it before, or at least more frequently in ways than we've ever used it before, creating areas where we can communicate with each other and collaborate with each other around the world in spaces which are not physically connected, but are connected to be able to create innovation and solutions. We find more and more of an investment of AV in broadcast and content and streaming services. The definition of all of those industries changing almost on a weekly basis at this point. And a key area of investment that we see taking place is in the ability to create and stream this content from corporate enterprises that never before were looking at this. An opportunity, huge opportunity for our industry. Of course, the live events, the bringing together, whether it's for corporate or whether or not it's a performance event, and experiencing the light and sound and the connectivity and the energy that we can reinforce as an industry. This is an example of AV in a lobby space in hospitality. There's really no vertical anywhere in the world that we don't impact and that we don't work within and that we don't reinforce, enhance, and provide value within. This is a retail store. Unlike any retail establishment that I ever experienced when I went shopping with mom and dad, it's far more about connecting with a brand, connecting with an experience, and reinforcing the opportunities to have the feeling of interacting with those brands. It's not so much about making a purchase as it used to be, and so much more about experiencing the brand and bringing that brand into your life and identifying what the value of that can be. And of course, all of us, and many of us in this room probably got our start working behind the stage on one of those types of events and identifying and recognizing and learning that there's actually an industry that sits behind that makes that happen. We tend to, as the association, looking to find you new talent to hire into your organizations, lean on this the most to try to entice youth to identify what is the opportunity within our industry and why should they become a part of our industry. I looked for a photo for hybrid office. The problem is that hybrid office is, in my opinion, in a perpetual beta mode at this point. And there is just really no picture to give you. And any picture I gave you that I captured, maybe even on the plane here on Monday, would have been outdated by today. What we do know is that hybrid office and the workplace of the future is a key driver for our industry. It's creating demands that none of us ever anticipated years ago. And with that disruption and with those demands, it's creating huge opportunities for us to be able to create value. It might be the metaverse, it might be AR, it might be VR. What I can tell you is that we're certain that it's going to be a combination of all of the above. And whatever it is on Monday of next week will not be what it is on the following week's Monday as well. This is an area that is really leveraging all the strengths of our industry, the ability to take a look at disparate parts, connect them together, and create a solution that re-enhances the experiences of human beings being with each other. All right, so this is the report set that I am about to dive into numbers. You can tell I like talking about AV more than numbers, but I think that the value of putting context around the industry and then sharing with you how we actually see this from a corporate perspective, how we see this from a value perspective, is a key part of what I'm hoping to give you in exchange for you taking time to attend this event. We produce 3 sets of reports. One is the Meta, which is the macroeconomic and trends analysis. This is where we look at global GDP. We look at the macro trends, things like the geopolitical impact of decisions being made around the world, and ask ourselves, how is that going to impact AV? Then we work on our industry outlook and trends analysis, and the numbers that I'm going to draw from for most of today's report draw from that report, and they're actually drawing from the 2022 report. My Vice President of Market Intelligence, Sean Wargo, asked me to make sure I teased the fact that 2023 will be published in a couple weeks and be announced and used at the InfoComm Orlando show. I'm stealing a little bit of his thunder with that, but most of what we're pulling out of this is from the 2022 edition. And then finally, we look at the macro trend, then we look at the industry itself from a channel and from a supply side. And then our more report is looking at how is the demand impacting that. So that whole series of information is going into those of you that are purchasing AV and asking you, what are you buying? And why are you buying it? And what do you intend to buy over the next quarter, year, multiple years? And then at the bottom, I have the employment channel trends report, and I have the AVBI, which is our industry vitality, and I'll show you March's numbers there. That's essentially telling you, how do we as an industry see ourselves? What is our sense of confidence moving forward? So the industry itself, in 2019, it was about a $259 billion industry. And we saw a significant hit during the pandemic. We dropped by $215 billion, which was more than we had anticipated to drop when we first started to look at the impact of the pandemic on AV. But I think what we all experienced was a greater impact from that pandemic than was anticipated at the outset. None of us really could have forecast how dramatic and how impactful that was going to be across. But by 2022, you can see that we set a new record. We reached a new peak. We were at $262 billion. Through that 2019 to 2022 phase, or the 2020 to 2022, we continued to outpace global growth. AV continues to be an industry that is growing faster than GDP anywhere in the world. Now, what I will show you is breaking this down from that global number to more of a regional number. And I'm showing it to you across the 3 regions that we tend to divide the world up into: the Americas, APAC, and EMEA. And you can see the first column under each of those. For example, APAC, 11.5%. That's the growth that our industry experienced between 2020 and 2022. In all 3 regions, you can see that we do see depressed growth. We do see that we are anticipating a bit of a slowdown in growth for the next 5 years. That column for the second column, the 2022 to 2027 of 6.6%, is what we're anticipating as growth for the next 3 years. That still takes us in 2027 to a $370 billion global industry. And it still is pacing at a pace faster than GDP growth. So we may not, as practitioners of AV, be experiencing the same type of growth that we've had for the last several years. You still have chosen wisely. You are still in an industry that is going to continue to be a place where you can be successful. Talked a little bit about this. Let me just lay this out. These are from the meta. I wanted to sort of lay out the global context here before I went too further. The Americas, you can see, is representing about a 1.8% growth over the next 5 years. In EMEA, we're seeing about a 2.2% growth. And then APAC continues to lead the pack at about 4% GDP growth overall. You can see our APAC is all the regions that are there in that sort of teal blue. And I know that I was chatting with somebody already this morning on the show floor about how oftentimes the challenge becomes how relevant is the information about Asia Pac when it's aggregated to a number that covers so many very different marketplaces, and we recognize that. One more plug for Shen. If you want access to our specific country level and very much more detailed level at each of the various different portions of the APAC marketplace, you can gain access to that through the IOTA. So in addition to sort of looking at that GDP, let's just look at this chart for a second. And really what we're trying to represent here is this consistent sort of pre-disruption, steady growth of the AV marketplace. And then just a mess from 2019, 2020 through 2022. We were hit with the pandemic. We have offices closing. We have people in isolation. We have industries en masse that were shutting down. The entire sector of our industry that supported live events was essentially not working for 2 years. Hotels were closed, then reopened. Retail establishments were closed and then reopened, redefining at a much faster pace what is the point of a retail store today compared to what it was just 5 years ago. That disruption being all of those jagged lines. But the beauty, the glass half full part of the story is that we are in a technology influencing value for human beings industry, and wherever there's disruption like this, there is opportunity for innovation. And we are very confident. We see the signs, early signs of our industry being able to take advantage of that type of disruption and continue its major growth. Some of those signs, if you look at the solutions that are being installed in the hospitality marketplace today, initially put in place for touchless capabilities in order to make people feel more comfortable staying and living in a shared space. But now you have leveraging virtual assistants and digital artwork and integrated control systems within the hotel space. These are all areas for us to participate in, all areas that if this is your vertical as an end user, you're leaning on the AV integrator to be able to bring that connectivity into the room and connect it with the rest of the systems experience. We, of course, talked about hybrid office. And this is one of those discussions that I think is going to continue. I know I've certainly participated in this discussion since 2020. I don't know how many other of you are in the room that were making decisions about where your workforce was housed at, but probably many of you shared the same story I did of, okay, we're going to close the office for 3 months, you work from home, and now in 3 months we're going to open the office, and then 3 months later, well, we're going to wait another month. Well, we're going to wait another month. Well, we're going to wait another month. Well, now we're going to come back on Mondays. Now we're going to come back on Mondays and Wednesdays. I'll stop. I still have scars. Thank you for indulging me. The good side of this, though, is the technologies, and I'm sure our panelists are going to be exploring some of this in the following presentation. But how do we leverage the technology? How do we leverage the learning experiences that we've all gained. The interesting thing for me is not so much the technology. Of course, it's become far more accessible. It's become far less expensive, and it's become far more ubiquitous. But I think if you look at the adoption curve for our industry, and you can go back 30 years, not that I'm old enough to go back that far, but some of you in the room look like you might be. The key of the utilization of our technology tends to be less focused on the actual capability of the technology and more on the acceptance of that technology and that integration of that technology into the human beings that are using it. And it's always been preceded by technical advancement and then reinforced and actually leveraged by human capabilities and human needs. And that's the area that I think we're at here now is exciting, is that people are used to working with each other in a hybrid space, but we aren't used to doing that in the office where some are local and some are not. And I know I'm speaking a bit from a US-centric perspective in regards to this, because much of the rest of the world is moving more quickly to returning to an office. In the US, we're still finding a significant amount of the workforce is working remotely. Back to my sort of opening comments of difficult for me to give you a presentation about the global AV trends because there's so many different specifics across various different industry and different geographies. I'm going to skip over that one because it's pretty US-centric. What it was basically saying, you saw a straight line and a wavy line. That was basically talking about rental costs for commercial real estate. And if you were to assume that nobody's ever going to go back to the office, you would presume that occupancy rate would be tanking, and you would be presuming that the rental rates would be going through the floor as well. And neither of them are. According to the U.S. Census Bureau and other U.S. government agencies. There is the consistent information across most of the other geographies as well. So here is a snapshot, and what I'm showing you here is the first way we divide the AV industry. When we look at this big sort of collection of everything from content creation and streaming to UCC and hospitality, we have to get our arms around it and create different ways of segmenting it to be able to show you value. So this is the first way I wanted to share with you the segmentation. This is showing you the various different verticals where AV is used. And the red dot is showing you the size of that vertical, and the darker dot is showing you the percentage of growth anticipated across that vertical. So if you look at the first one, obviously the largest is corporate. And so this is AV in the corporate space. It doesn't matter whether it's a display or a loudspeaker, and it doesn't matter if it's being used in a conference room or in a lobby. This is AV being deployed by corporate enterprise. And you can see that it's growing at about we anticipate its growth to be at about a 5.5% compound annual growth rate, or CAGR. It is our largest segment. But if you look at transportation, for example, a smaller one, it's growing at a faster rate. And actually, most of the other verticals represent a faster growth rate than corporate. And so wanted to make sure I highlighted that with this slide. Now, I mentioned more. I'd mentioned that we look at the demand side as well. So this piece, I was showing you what is it that we anticipate taking place within the channel itself. This is looking at the actual buyers from each of those verticals and asking them, what do you plan to increase your capital investments in second quarter of 2023? Now that's over Q2 in 2022. And what you can see is, even if you go all the way, if you're the glass half empty person in the room, you go all the way to the bottom, even in the education industry, 47% of the people that we surveyed and contributed to this study say that they intend to spend more money in 2023 than they did in 2022 in Q2. You could see the areas where the most significant expenditures are being made, and it's hospitality, transportation, and retail. Now, if I'd shown the same slide to you last year, Corporate would have been at the top of that. But you can begin to start to see that much of that investment has already been made in those areas. A lot of the sort of facelifting and redoing of the workspace has already taken place. On the far right, those numbers that you see sitting there are asking of those companies that are anticipating to make capital investments that are greater than they were last year, how much of your capital expenditure are you anticipating will be on AV? So I know we have a lot of people that fall into the category of AV users in the room, people that are making these decisions in this room. I'm not sure how these align with your experience, but we're seeing in some of these vertical markets as much as 40%, for example, in the venues and entertainment, of their capital expenditures are being made on audiovisual technology. And where are those investments being made? We wanted to identify that, and these 5 areas are the ones I thought would be most helpful to highlight for you. The first is in boardrooms, group collaboration spaces, and then the second is in the individual workspaces. You see classrooms and corporate training facilities. Control rooms has moved into the top 5. That really wasn't there before, as well as AV production rooms for broadcast. It seems to be growing out of not only the overall demographic trend to move to more video communication, video-based communications, but also the experiences that many corporations had with trying to use remote technology to communicate and having less than high quality experiences and needing to create environments where executives could communicate with an entire company, where management could communicate with a distributed workforce all around the world and and communicate in a high quality fashion. I talked a bit about the retail experience and how AV is providing a differentiation in the experience. I think that leverages to every vertical that we've talked about at this point. I did want to include this slice for you. So I just talked about dividing the industry into verticals that we serve. This is now dividing the industry into solutions that we provide. So drawing your attention to the first one, that conferencing and collaboration space. Oftentimes, we tend to think of conferencing and collaboration as only enterprise, but we all know that that's not true, right? You have conferencing and collaboration investments being made in hotels. You have them being made in schools. So what this slide is doing is showing you the various different ways we've categorized how AV is used, regardless of who is actually buying it. So you'll see conferencing, collaboration, learning, that incorporates not only educational classrooms within schools and universities, but corporate training centers and other training centers, commercial training centers. You could see largest segment being conferencing and collaboration. You could see, if you look at the bottom row, the performance, entertainment, and live events reflecting that return to in-person experiences, showing significant growth, much higher than some of the more established. I will highlight for you digital signage. Actually, in the next report, digital signage will be seen, or by 2027, we actually predict digital signage will be the largest market. It will take that conferencing and collaboration space on this slide. So for those of you involved in that, you've chosen very well. And if you're not involved in that, that's an area where I would highly suggest you make investments in developing expertise and ability to meet the needs of possible clients. I don't think any of us can really have any conversation today without talking about artificial intelligence, big data. There's so much news about this today. We've been talking about this for a long time, but the pace of adoption is accelerating. I am certain that you will see this mentioned in almost every exhibitor's stand downstairs with regards to how they're enhancing their capabilities. I'll tell you a personal story. I have a 20-something-year-old son. So again, I imagine there are a few people in the room that can experience this, who is incredibly He's very clearly far more astute and intelligent than I am, and all you have to do is ask him that. But what he did highlight for me at one point was the promotion of, I'll leave the brand out, but of a mobile phone, and talking about the enhanced capabilities of their cameras as a potential differentiation. And his comment was, you realize, Dad, that none of those enhancements that you're using for differentiation has anything to do with the hardware. 5G continuing to create greater capability for connection. None of us really know where that's going to head, but what we do know is for our industry, easier connection of people from remote locations is good for the audiovisual industry. And then finally, AR, VR, continuing to look at how do we leverage this. I think the days of the prediction of face-to-face going away and everybody's going to live behind an AR or a VR set have disappeared for the short term, but it will surely continue to be a factor for us. And none of us want to be in a position where we say, why in the world would anybody want a computer on their desk? Kind of situation like we've all heard referred to in the past. The final area I'll slide the industry into, or slice the industry into, is the products themselves. So we talked about the vertical, where they're used. We talked about how they're used. And this is showing you the trends when you break it down into what are the various different product categories that are incorporated within AV. And you'll see the largest being content management hardware, and the fastest growing, which is a reflection on that content and production and streaming. All of those UCC calls, every Zoom call, Teams call, WebEx call that you're on that's recorded is getting recorded onto a piece of content management hardware. And as any of you have experienced, without being able to access that content, it's of no value. It's like the boxes in your garage or your attic or your basement or your shed that you have no idea what they're in and you can't find anything. You know you have it, but you don't know how to get to it. So key areas for us to be able to continue our investments in. I will draw back to make this next slide make sense, the services segment. So that's the second circle. That's $58 billion, and remember, of that $269 billion market I was talking about. So it's about 20% of the overall AV industry. We put into this not only managed services, but also integration itself. So how much is charged? This is also where the consulting services would be charged or categorized into within our industry. And what I want to show you here is managed services, because we all keep talking about managed services and we talk about AV as a service. And I do think, and you see here a reflection since 2020 of continued growth in that area. But even at 2027, where you see it being about a $9.3 billion industry, that's actually only about 10% of 20% of the AV industry. So there's still huge room and opportunity and growth in that area. But taking us back to that disruption, I don't know how effectively everybody continues to work towards, and that may be another area that you would easily be able to fall into saying we're in a perpetual beta of how do we actually deliver this. One more slide about who is managing AV. I thought it would be valuable to highlight for you. And this is from our research on the demand side. We have a audiovisual, it's AVIP. These are about 5,000 self-identified contributors to survey questions for us, as well as the different analysts that we send out into the field. And what we've identified is that 52% of companies say that the people that manage AV are part of their IT staff. They're less than half of the organizations that we work with at this point have a standalone AV department. They may have an AV department, but it's a subset within the IT department. 31% of the companies have an IT resource as the lead on AV projects, compared to 25% saying they use an AV resource. And 38% say an IT manager is directly involved in the decision-making process for purchases and technology upgrades. So why is that important? That's important because that's why we have these types of events. That's why we're bringing you into this room. And that's one of the areas I mentioned AVIXA more broadly as an industry association is most focused on. Those who have been in the AV industry for their entire career typically know who InfoComm is and who AVIXA is. It is these new decision makers, the people that have been thrust into this industry, that we're trying to reach as an industry association, and that we're hoping that these shows become more and more relevant to. We want these people to be identifying themselves as specialists within the information technology infrastructure and department. I offered that I would share the index reporting that we have. Now, these are diffusion indexes. Now, what that means is that if it's higher than 50%, then it's getting better. And if it's lower than 50%, then it's getting bad. And these are sentiment. So what we ask people, you can see in the top one, there's two different indexes. The sales index is asking people whether or not they anticipate their sales to go up or go down in the next quarter. And then we give them the ability to say, stay the same, change significantly, or decrease significantly. And you can see that we still are very optimistic with a key leap there in March, offsetting a significant or a somewhat declining anticipation that was still above the 50%. And then the bottom one is looking at and something I imagine is near and dear to all of you, which is workforce. And do you intend to hire people or employ more people or less people over the coming quarter? And you can see that continues to be well above 60%. So what are the final messages to leave you with? Growth is tailing. We do anticipate that the industry will continue to grow, but we anticipate that it's going to be moderated compared to the last several years. The second point here is a reinforcement of that hybrid as a disruptor. We really don't have a clear understanding of that. It's still going to stay in the beta with multiple different iterations. One that I would highlight you sort of at the bottom of that column there is how quickly will these solutions become commoditized, and how quickly will you need to move to another area to be able to deliver value for your customers. And then finally, innovation is pending. Office reimagination, the disruption is a good thing for us. And you can see this sort of continued evolution of our business model. How do we serve? What is, I've been working with the industry and challenging definitions of what is an integrator, what is a consultant, what is an end user, what is a manufacturer versus a solution provider. These areas will continue to be impacts on our industry. They're not going to get solved. I'm sorry. If any of you were hoping that today I would give you the answer to any of those, I don't have that available to you. My final commercial advertisement for our industry information and market intelligence. These are available at avixa.org. And if you have any questions for me, you can reach out to me via my email address is up there at dlabuskes@avixa.org. And I think I unfortunately talked too long to give you any time for questions, but I'll be around all day if you have anything that you wanted to approach me about. Thank you for your attention. I appreciate it.
Around what are the key drivers of the China, India, and Southeast Asia AV market respectively? What do the panelists see as a top challenge in their market and business? And where do they see the top 3 growth sectors coming from in future and why? I think some of those were already alluded by David.
It's my pleasure to be your moderator today, and I hope you find this session on the AV Asia market forecast both inspiring for the future. Despite some of the headwinds that we're currently encountering, as he says, and as Dave said before in the prior presentation, we are definitely in the right industry. Last year, I did speak on a panel that followed a fascinating but sobering session from a global analyst at The Economist, and they were giving us a forecast of what they thought was going to happen in 2023. And I certainly needed a stiff drink after that session, but I'm pleased to say, some of the things that, the Economist was forecasting, haven't occurred. And actually, the industry is looking to be in rude health. But our North Star for this session is one of optimism for the industry, as a whole. Thank you so much to InfoComm for arranging and assembling, this awesome panel. So Thomas did introduce the panelists, but one thing I wanted to do also was to just reflect a little bit more about, the panelists and myself's personal side of things. I did ask them prior to the session to give us, if they had a dinner party, if they held a dinner party, and who would they invite? 3 people, famous people, alive or dead, to their dinner party, and just to kind of give a bit of an idea of, some of the personal aspirations and interests of the panelists. I'll go first, if you don't mind, if you indulge me. My dinner party guests, they would be Robin Williams. As a comic genius, there'd be impressions all the way, and I don't think there'd be a quiet moment in the dinner party itself. The footballer Zlatan Ibrahimovic. He's over 40 years old, but still playing professional level football. Clearly bonkers, but he would have some great football stories, and that would allow Robin to really, jive with Zlatan. And finally, just to reflect my media and video games background, the co-creators of The Last of Us TV show that was recently on, Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann. It was based on a video game called The Last of Us, greatest video game of all time. And the recent TV show was epic as well. So for me, it's all about football, movies, and video games. If I can just kind of hand over to Zane, for your 3 dinner party guests, who might they be?
Yes, when Tom told us that he's going to ask us a question, the 3 names that popped up to me immediately were Jesus, C.S. Lewis, and then one name that you might not be familiar with. Sawa-san who is in the room might, but otherwise, the name is Adachi Mizuru, Japanese manga artist. You know him, right? And these are all great people. I mean, Jesus is both God and people. But that is not my point. My point is all 3 of them has met so much adversity in their life, and they still remain to be funny and inspiring, and has been so important to many people's life. I think that applies very much to our industry. We have been through so much adversity the last few years, and I hope that we still keep our energy, keep ourselves somewhat funny to work through this tapering growth year in the next 5 years. I'm sure that we'll be through this. Yeah, that's my 3 guess.
Awesome, Zane. Thank you so much. And I guess with Jesus in attendance, it would be fish and bread for dinner. Mradul, your 3 dinner party guests?
I'll start with Morgan Freeman for that voice. The next one will be Leo Laporte. Not sure you follow Twit as a podcast for technology. I'm a big fan of Leo Laporte. And just to kind of build some diversity, I'll invite Margot Robbie from Hollywood. Just for diversity, guys. Nothing more than that.
Margot Robbie, what more is there to be said? And Aurangzeb?
Yes, I was maybe getting the homework done, but I think I've got 3. And the whole idea of having a set of folks for dinner is to have a lively conversation and interesting meetings. So, sorry, can you hear me? Is it fine? Try this. Can you hear me better? Okay, sorry, the mic was off. So, did my homework quickly, and I'll start with, my first love as a student was physics and math, and so Richard Feynman, great person to learn physics from. So definitely want him there. And then I'm a co-founder, as you said, of Altair Systems. I'm now part of GN Jabra, which is a 150-year-old Danish company. And it would be great to meet the founder, C.F. Tietgen, who laid the first cable from Europe to China at the very start of the information revolution for telegraph in those days. And then a personal passion, my whole life has been playing squash rackets. So Hashim Khan, who was a pioneer and did brilliantly, famous squash player from Pakistan, where I grew up, would be my 3rd invitee.
Awesome, Aurangzeb. Thank you so much for that. So before we start and get into the questions, I think we'll all appreciate a little bit of housekeeping. We've got 3 questions lined up. And, with time allowing, maybe not so much now. We were planning on a Q&A at the end, but we do kind of like have a 45-minute hard stop. So if we can keep our answers, concise, that would be great. So we can have some cross discussion as well, build on our folks' answers, but let's not eat too much into everyone's lunch time and etc. But I'm sure you appreciate that in Aurangzeb, Mradul, and Zane. You can say we've got you covered from A to Z in terms of AV experience. So please join me in welcoming our panel. Okay, so on to the first question. We all know that certain aspects of AV are becoming more and more commoditized, yet brand innovations as well can also introduce complexity. Seamlessness, intuitive interfaces, and something that just works, it needs a lot of careful design and education. So with that in mind, gentlemen, what do you see as being the key drivers for growth in the Asia AV market? Could it be the areas of innovation, AI, ESG, live events, some of the areas that Dave was mentioning before, or something else? Maybe just start with Zane first.
Yes. And as Thomas mentioned, we want to look at the whole industry perspective from China perspective, from an India perspective, from a Southeast Asia perspective. And you look at this panel and the moderator, who is the one to speak about China? I guess I will be the de facto one. And it's so funny that under my name, it says Hong Kong SAR, Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. It does not say Hong Kong, China yet. So it's maybe good. But anyway, I'm just going to talk a little bit about my working experience in mainland China in the last 2.5 decades. If some of you are old enough to remember, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, China did, and King, you know that, China did not have the greatest highway, freeway infrastructure or the landline telecom infrastructure. China did not have anything on that aspect. So what did they do? They developed the new mobile infrastructure. They developed the application on your cell phone running on mobile. They basically leapfrogged the whole 30, 50, 70 years of infrastructure spending that Europe and US did earlier in the decade, in that century, that is. So that made me think a little bit about what we want to do now in terms of reducing the complexity. If you had been to China, if you had not been to China, you might have heard about this thing called WeChat. WhatsApp is a social media application, but WeChat is a platform. It's a platform that does a lot of things, if not everything, everyday person's life. And that platform allows a lot of plug-in. So you build your application and that plug into the platform, so that will become available to a lot of people. And actually yesterday, if I should digress a little bit, I came here to take a look at this venue yesterday. This is a fantastic venue. But this venue has so much. It has a lot of food outlet. It has a pharmacy. It has everything you need for three-day show. It reminds me that the platform is one thing that you can build to reduce all the difficulty, friction about people wanting or not wanting to go back to the office to work. If you make your new hybrid office somewhat like a platform that people working from home or going to the office to work experience the same experience, that platform will be providing a lot of values to a lot of people. If I'm a working mom, if I were a working mom, if the day I choose to stay at home and the platform provides the same working experience to me, whether I'm going to office or not, I think that would mean a lot and provide a lot of values to those people. China is doing great on that aspect, but it does not mean China can be the only country to do that.
Well, the AV industry as it stands is moving from the stage of infancy to maturity. What pandemic did was this transition was accelerated, right? So we're moving towards maturity faster than ever. AV today is more IT than ever. In fact, as designers, we adopt a IT-first strategy towards our designs. If you look at some of the notes Dave had in his slides, he spoke about AI. On the AI front, computer vision was something which was adopted on the UCC space, probably earlier than in comparison to any other verticals. We see application around NLP, LLM, which is again an extension of AI, happening again in the UCC space. So story is we are at a stage where IT has become extremely important. If you talk about India as a market, India is already the office of the world. We aspire to be the factory of the world sometime soon. And the enterprise market contributes significantly to the revenue of the AV industry. The numbers, if you look at it from the economics point of view, in the next 10 years, India should be doubling its GDP. With doubling of GDP, the question to ask is, what kind of value do you bring to kind of enable that? And demographics is one of the main reasons why India is going to probably grow at that stage. We are seeing a lot of investment going into the manufacturing, logistics, and add a value from the tourism point of view. The per capita GDP of India is likely to cross $5,000 US. Now, with that as a number, what we're talking about is the spending capacity for middle class and the upper middle class is going to go to over the roof. And from that angle, again, alluding to some of the slides we saw earlier, where retail and digital signage perhaps will be as big a market as compared to UCC. When you have a middle class and upper middle class spending so much, the retail market with AV is going to grow in a significant way. So these are the opportunities that we see from the market I come from.
Thank you so much, Mradul. Aurangzeb?
I think for the ASEAN market, as you know, the economies are growing quite strongly, and they're also very well connected to the global economy. So from our vantage point, particularly from a Jabra perspective, you saw Dave talk about hybrid work and the retooling of offices, how people will work. It requires new technologies. You'll see more of that on the show floor, and I'm hoping you'll join us for those events. So that is a clear opportunity for growth, and we think that the North Star that appears to work is to make the experience easy to consume and easy to participate. So if you can include everybody, if people feel that the experience is natural, that they're focused on the conversation and not on the technology, it just makes it easier. And a lot of the folks here work with their counterparts not only in local geographies, but all over the world. So I think that can be a very strong engine. Of course, education and healthcare and telemedicine are other strong drivers right behind it. And just as you see, this infrastructure, these kinds of new facilities will accelerate this virtuous cycle of connectedness and growth.
No, absolutely. And I can also see that in the work that we're doing as well, that ease of use, that inclusion, the digital equity in terms of the experience is one of the key drivers that we're obviously seeing in our part of the world as well. So just to, if I can just summarize, so from Zane's perspective, a key driver would be a platformization, as it were, of the experience. Mradul, the key driver you're seeing is, demographics, just pure, having to cater to the market as it matures over the coming years. And Aurangzeb as well, ease of use, inclusion, being some of those key drivers. Thank you so much, guys, for your answers there. On to the next question. So certainly from my business's perspective, I see a lot of projects out there, a lot of clients still planning on change, and that was certainly reinforced from Dave's previous keynote. I mean, a change is good for us in the industry, whether that change is an expansion or whether it's a contraction, it still ends up being a need for service. However, I think we're all seeing huge pressure on fees and protracted decision making, and it does kind of lead to resource planning challenges, which also raises the question of talent, something that PTS are going to be speaking about in our session later on this afternoon. Of course, COVID-19 has been declassified now as a pandemic. It's now something that we're all living with, something like the common cold. Ease of stresses in the supply chain now, and the backdrop of new and old global tensions. These are all things and events, global macro events that have occurred in the last 12 months. So with that in mind, gents on the panel, what do you see as the top challenges in your respective markets and business? And what are your strategies and plans to address them? Maybe Aurangzeb, if I can throw over to you first.
So I think, building on what we talked about earlier, the idea of experience, how do you build a great experience for collaboration? We think that close partnership with the UC service providers is essential. So Zoom and Microsoft are key partners that we work with very closely. The other is to make that experience easy to deploy and easy to support and serve. In that case, working with the many, many people in this room, with our partners in the ecosystem, is quite essential. So in addition to the UC service providers, it's the folks that make these experiences come alive in the physical locations, right? And then it's a roadmap that provides compelling value. And for us, Mradul talked about computer vision. We were very early adopters. We were very early adopters of AI. And AI is now poised for a next wave as these large language models become ubiquitous and easy to consume. So we see a very rich roadmap of innovation, enabling that sense of belonging and ease of use and so on. Dave said video is growing, and there are many folks who talk about how video, being on video and being connected via video, makes the experience more real and more human. So we do see, at least for that piece, a good opportunity ahead all the way around.
Thank you so much. Mradul?
Well, we are not insulated from the challenges that Tom, you spoke about. We continue to have pressure on fees. Change management is a difficult process to follow. But on the other side, we also have challenges with regards to talent. Our industry continues to have a war for talent. Finding the right talent, have the ability to retain them for a long time is another situation we are seeing right now. Again, talking about India, the story is such a big market, such a diverse market. What has worked for us from the point of view of approaching our business has been fundamentally two different ends. Number one, when you look at India as a market, you have to go for volume. It's a cost-sensitive market. To go for volume, it's important you build capacity. And to build capacity, you need talent, you need processes, procedures. So we did two things. Number one, we have basically defined a certain focus that, guess what, as consultants, we'll only focus on the enterprise space. By doing the same kind of projects again and again, what we call it is repetition is the mother of skill. We kind of create a mindset which is unparalleled for our customers, and that's how we differentiate ourselves with our peers. The second piece is automation. What can be done on the production side where you achieve automation? A very classic story from our side. Well before ChatGPT became a sensation that it is right now, early last year, we tried playing with Mark.ai. It's a tool from UK. And the primary purpose of Mark.ai is fundamentally to help you write blogs to improve your SEO rankings and thereby get better listings on Google search. What it does is you key in the keywords and it gives you a paragraph, which can be a blog on your website. Now, while we have reasonable spoken skills in India, the written skills are not so great. And as consultants, we are supposed to write lovely reports. We started using Mark.ai to automate the process of writing reports by keying in keywords, sound isolation on acoustics, mechanical noise control, and therefore you kind of create a lively report out of it, proofread it, and push it out to the client. So automation is the second part. How can you automate your process at the back end to fundamentally meet the customer satisfaction, have consistency of outcomes, while keeping the variables around people and other pieces. So that's what we've been doing. Yep.
Thank you so much. So, obviously, a big focus of ours is with regards to talent as well. And I'll probably do a follow-up question after this. But Zane, on your side for the challenges and strategies to address?
Yes, I'll keep it short before my writers might tell me again. And the one challenge is obvious to this word commoditization. It's always a balance between how soon people say this is good enough, I'm not going to pay more, or whether the client would want to work with you to push it to the best or the maximum. I want to quote one example. I was with my family and my mother in Tokyo over the past weekend for a vacation, which is obviously good. But at the same time, many of us are fond of going to Japan for vacation. But even if even if the yen exchange rate is not so favorable as right now, we still wanted to go to Tokyo for good time. And there has to be a reason why we are so fond of going to Japan, because the experience is so good there. I mean, whether it's a 3-day vacation or 1 month ski vacation, it's just so good that you don't mind opening your wallet and to pay for it. So I guess there is a fine balance between commoditization and going to push for the experience. And I learned from our friend in AVIXA, that commoditization is not necessarily an evil word. Sometimes it's good because we can buy more hardware with the same amount of money, but with that extra money in the pocket, you can push the experience with software, with the experience that you craft. So I guess that is one thing that we all should give it a think.
No, it's certainly very thought-provoking. I mean, if I can just summarize, to address the kind of challenges, Aurangzeb, you're talking about close collaboration with our partners in our entire ecosystem. Mradul, you've talked about talent, process, and automation. And of course, Zane, you're mentioning a balance between, it sounds like a balance between cost versus value, right? It's got to be about value. And as a consultancy, we're always talking about value. Maybe if I can just do a follow-up question. How are you gents looking at addressing, I think, a global challenge that we have with regards to the lack of talent? I mean, just before the session started, I was having a chat with Dave, and we were talking about the airline industry and the lack of, pilots and baggage handlers and that talent that went away during the pandemic. And now we're struggling the airline industry is struggling to, replenish that supply of talent. And that has this unforeseen circumstance where the cost of flights is near doubled. So that's just one example of our talent. A shortage of talent is affecting us all. I'll just open this up to the panel. What are your thoughts and ideas in terms of how we might address the talent shortage we find ourselves in as well?
I'll just take a start. There's no magic answer. I'll just say in our case, indeed, in fact, the talent has so many different markets to go into, all the way from electric vehicles to autonomous smart buildings and the rest. We've had some success in finding bright folks who want to see the impact of their work at a global scale early in their career. That is one thing our industry does offer, right? You figure something out, and if you do get a good rinse and repeat, it applies everywhere. And, we've seen solutions deployed in 20, 30 countries from folks who are just a few years out of college. That's a personally very gratifying place for them, right? So that's perhaps one idea to help.
Gents?
Well, AV as a package in the fit-out space is one of the fastest growing packages and one of the most exciting packages. What we are seeing here is talent from different verticals like building automation and IT are getting attracted to AV as an industry. While there's a lot of heavy lifting happening to build a pool of talent through AVIXA and different channels, we also see talent coming and approaching us from the traditional BMS companies, CCTV companies, IT companies to understand how can they basically be part of this growth trajectory. So that's one part, but it's easier said than done. I mean, the supply demand is so astute. I mean, we are talking about demand being there and supply, even with these ends, nowhere being close to where we should be. It's an uphill task. And as I said earlier, as businessmen, we mitigate this risk by means of looking at automation. Can we kind of find a way where we keep the people side of situation isolated and kind of find technology to find an answer for that?
Thank you. Zane?
Yep. I agree with Aurangzeb. It's going to take time. A lot of people left 3 years ago, so it takes time for them to come back. But at the same time, I want to echo one thing that Aurangzeb mentioned. Not sure about every one of you, but 30 years ago, 35 years ago, when I entered the industry, this is about the sexiest industry on the market. It probably is not the case right now for a youngster, for fresh graduate from the university. So maybe there's a thing for the industry to rethink how do we want to reshape the AV industry so that it will still be interesting to young people. I mean, there are plenty of other things they can go to, and maybe it's time that we want to package our industry a little different.
Thank you, Zane. I think that's a really thought-provoking point you've made there. If I can move on to our last question. If I could make one project-related, one wish, professional-related, of course, I think it would be for adequate time to deliver our projects. So based on the requirement from the client, getting enough time to be able to understand that properly and fully with such a diverse culture here in Asia, to properly execute the quality that the client needs. If you had one business-related wish, what would it be and why? And I'll ask Mradul to start answering on this one.
Well, I'm in a happy place right now. I like the way the market is growing. I like what we are doing right now. I mean, keeping talent aside, I don't have any special wish to make, honestly. On the personal side, if you allow me, I would like to be 20 kilos lighter. I would probably want to have the confidence to wear a blue and a red tie like my colleagues here are wearing, right? Which otherwise I'm unable to right now. But yeah, that's all.
That's to be honest, mate, I don't think you need to, lose 20 kilos. I think you could pull off a blue jacket and red tie today.
I'm covering up some of my angles, right, with this jacket.
Aurangzeb?
I think that I talked about the idea of experience and improvements in experience and so on. That's continues to be our focus, right? What brings people to use the product and services we deliver is that they enjoy it and they find that they can get what they want to get done better and faster. Particularly for video, we've been doing a lot of work on how to make people look great regardless. You see the situation where people who are not familiar with video or cameras will have a bright window behind them and then they'll come across silhouette and they won't know that. But of course, the far side is not seeing them, it's seeing the view outside their window, right? So simple things like that, technology can make a big difference, and that's maybe a small ambition, but that's sort of one of the kinds of ambitions. Applying technology to make people look as good as they can in the environments that they operate from.
And if you had a personal wish, what would that be?
So you haven't prepared for that, so.
Well, okay. Let me give you a bit of time to think about that. Well, maybe Zane, if you can answer on the professional.
If I can be granted a wish, I would like to be a better communicator, especially to my clients, because I think many of our difficulties doing our daily job is how to communicate better. Whether I can understand their requirements better. Sometimes they don't even want to talk to you about their real requirements. You have to guess. You have to just blind. It's just a pick a card. Those type of situation. It's funny. After so many years, we are in the telecommunication industry. We are in the AI industry, and it doesn't sound like the people are communicating any better than 50 years ago. So if I had a wish, I would like to be talking more, to be communicating more with my project clients, understand them better. So I'm pretty sure that we can do our projects and complete our project a lot better than the average project.
I think you're right, and certainly the experience we've had over the last few years, a lot of focus now needs to be on mindfulness as well, and mental health, because there is a lot of pressure in our line of work, and I think you're right. That does need to help and aid communication. For my side, in terms of maybe a personal wish, it would be the ability to stop time, being able to just stop time and just be able to just smell the roses, maybe live in an analog state for a short time, and then restart before we, get back into things as well. Is there anything else you gentlemen would like to add on to your thoughts before we wrap up the panel? Okay. How are we doing for time, Thomas? Do we have time for a Q&A? Maybe just 8 minutes. Sure. Okay. So if there's any Q&A and any questions anyone would like to ask the panel, then please feel free to ask.
A lot of the brands that are focusing on developing technologies based on, let's say, Fortune 500 companies that are more based out of US or the Western Europe, how are they addressing the needs of the enterprise and the large corporations that are more headquartered in Asia? Are their needs being met effectively? And is that industry could do something more as even OEMs to address the needs of the companies that are more based out of Asia? And because we see a tremendous growth of these companies here, but a lot of times these global standards and a lot of technologies that are developed based on what we see in the Fortune 500 companies that are from the US or the Western Europe. Just curious to hear any perspective on, are there things that OEMs could do better to actually address the needs of the companies that are more based out of here?
I can give you a start. In our case, we run a set of customer councils, and these are regional. So we have North American Council. We also have European and Asia-based councils, and there are new ones being put together. India is a growing region, so we're trying to listen to the customers and potential customers in that region to inform our roadmap and kind of the products we deliver. So at least we're making an effort to adapt to that.
Yeah, if I can take the second piece. So Jatan, we have two different category of customers. Global MNCs who have offices in India, Indian MNCs who aspire to be global MNCs someday, right? When you talk about global MNCs, they have standards, they have consistency of user experience, predictability about outcomes. And the India team and the global team collaborate extensively. To that end, the problem statements in India are consistent with the problem statements elsewhere in the world. So the technology gap is not there. The Indian MNCs are building up the per square feet dollar to spend on AV, but they most of the times try to reinvent the wheel. They try to think about problems which honestly do not require the time of different stakeholders. Their expectation with technology is similar to the global MNCs, right? We are talking about productivity, engagement, leading to performance of employees. The cycle for the Indian MNC is slightly longer, but having said that, from what we see, problem statement is consistent all across. And to that end, I don't think we're missing any technology per se, which is required for this region being built outside of India.
I agree, Mradul. And politics aside, workplace requirements in, say, China is actually not so different from any other country. So we require the same tools to work our day job. On the other hand, in terms of manufacturing, in terms of the supply chain, it could be very different between China and any other countries in Asia. So that takes a lot of tailoring and iron out. Maybe that's a job for AVIXA to figure out. And how to make this process as frictionless as possible. Because a lot of the equipment, not all anymore, not all the equipment are manufactured in China anymore, but still the requirements are very similar, I would think. It's really about the supply chain and the distribution, I think.
So, sorry, Mradul.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one small piece. Thanks, Tom. Technology is changing so fast, so soon, right? Look at a small data which I read a couple of days back. Snapchat took 100 or 120 days to hit 100 million users. ChatGPT took 5 days. To be at that end of hype curve so fast, so soon, right? And then you're talking about AI taking over, and it's become a buzzword, which becomes the center point around where all technologies will start happening now. So technology transition or development is another piece here, right? Where we are living in a world where things are happening too fast, too soon.
I think I'm at risk of not getting invited to the next panel, but I'm going to disagree with my colleagues on to my left here. But I grew up, I was educated and worked in the UK before moving to Singapore in 2010. And I think certainly when I was working in the UK, you know, I was working for big multinationals in the UK, and and the UK was considered a satellite of the motherships in the US. To even from there consider standards and problem briefs and problem statements in Asia, you know, forget about it. It wasn't even considered. And then so moving to Asia and working with MNCs here, it's such a, like I mentioned before, diverse culture, so many different countries and very close proximity to each other. We often find that when we work for a client and they say, "Oh no, we've got standards," we look at those standards and we say a couple of things. Number one, there are gaps in their standards that don't apply to certain situations, and not only that, those standards are skewed towards the Western market. So from that perspective, I would say that there is a little bit of work to be done there. And I think maybe, as Aurangzeb mentioned before, close collaboration with our partners in the ecosystem to maybe just to help engage and educate with regards to the local differences in Asia to, you know, maybe more Western markets. That's probably an area of improvement we could have. And that would be, I think, one step forward for improvement, and certainly in that area. Thank you for the question. I think just keeping an eye on the time, I'm going to wrap up this panel. So if I can just say one more time to thank you to Aurangzeb, Mradul, and Zane for your amazing thoughts. And yeah, thank you so much for your time, everyone.